We're helping other women get past their fears and resistance to asking those questions and giving them a comfortable space to really get confident in this industry.
Hi, and welcome to Solar for All, a podcast focused on the intersection of clean energy and the issues of race, class, justice, and equity. I'm your host, Jeff Greenfield, and all the show notes and other resources are located at our website, solarforall.show, and that's spelled out S-H-O-W. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest, Justine Sanchez. Justine is currently the program director for Mayfield Renewables Solar and Storage Program. And she is it is hard to say a number this big. She's a 26-year solar vet, been in a variety of influential and important roles in the industry. I've read probably 100 pieces by her and many more edited by her. She's been the technical editor at Home Power magazine, and has done a lot of training at Solar Energy International. And I think, if my hazy memory serves me, we met at Midwest Renewable Energy Festival in the old location in Custer, not quite 26 years ago. I think you were working at NREL way back then, as well as doing some SEI stuff. But it's been a while. So Anyway, welcome to our show, Justine.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, this is great. Those were fun days. The MREF days were the best. It was always on the summer solstice, and we would drive out in an odd number of vehicles, all kinds of different funny vehicles to get there as young. Gosh, I guess I was in my late 20s back then, just having a ball, entering the industry, and I'd found my people at that point. And so we were just having a really good time traveling around the country, teaching about solar, and just playing with the visionaries in the industry, the revolutionaries, the ones that really set our world on fire, in these beautiful locations in the middle of the Midwest in the U.S. And those are great times.
Yeah. And the industry sure has grown, mostly for better. The true kind of pioneers, true believers are now somewhat diluted with plenty of, gold rush seeking entrepreneurs and, the money folks, and going to SPI with ties is a lot different from going to MREF with tie dyes. But I think at the end of the day,
that's a good way to put
it. At the end of the day, the solar industry still is a pretty amazing place to work. And boy, with this recent election and just kind of consensus that climate change is real and it's also a huge opportunity, it seems like new people are finding their way into our industry left and right. It's exciting times.
Yeah. I agree, but I'm also amazed at how many folks we've known that are still in the industry these 20, almost 30 years later. You go to those shows and you still see they might have different hats on, different shirts on. Maybe it's a tie now, like you were saying. But this is an industry that kind of tends to hold on to their folks because it's such a good one and it's full of inspiring and inspired individuals trying to work towards a common goal. And I have never considered leaving solar in almost 30 years. I'm like, why would I ever do that? These people are amazing. And I think I have lifelong friends in the industry. We've all been, we got married, we had kids, we bought houses, we've shifted the companies we've worked for, but these are real friends that we've made over these decades. And it's a great place to be.
Yeah, indeed we are, and I'm glad and proud to call you one of my great friends in the industry. And tell me, so you went to UC Boulder way back when, and you were not an electrical engineering major. How did you get into solar? Tell me a little bit about your early path.
It's funny, and I've heard this before with a couple other people. I wanted to be an astronaut. I actually went to CU Boulder and I started aerospace engineering with goals of becoming an astronaut. I entered in 1988 is when I started school. And all of a sudden it quickly became apparent I wasn't probably going to go to space. That wasn't really going to be my pathway forward. So I actually switched to physics. And it wasn't until my senior year that I really got excited. I stumbled upon the PV effect just in some random research. And all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute. Are you telling me that there's a synergy between between silicon and the band gap energy of silicon and the energy of photons that can liberate electrons and just with no moving parts, nothing to maintain really, and just start creating electricity from falling sunshine. I mean, it was just magical. And it was one of those things like, and we could displace fossil fuels with this technology. Like all of a sudden I was really like, it was the first time I got super, super excited about science in general, even though I'd been, science was my thing, but not like a heartfelt thing. It was more of like an intellectual thing. This struck me in my heart. And it was one of those moments. It was a watershed moment where I just said, oh my gosh, I think I know what I want to do. And because I happened to be at CU Boulder, I had acquaintances that had ties to the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, because it's just the next town over, basically. And I was able to get my first job right out of school at NREL. And so that was great. I got to work immediately at the lab. I was in the field. I was working with pyranometers. I'm straight out of college. I was working with the Solar Radiation Resource Assessment Division. So we made solar maps. And I actually got to be in the field, messing with the pyranometers. And it was great. My first boss was Dave Renee, who was a really wonderful gentleman. I still see him at solar shows. This many years later. That's back from 1993. So that was awesome. But the thing that struck me not too long after working a couple years in that space is that I didn't want to be researching the stuff anymore. I wanted to be a part of the force deploying what I believe to already be a tried and true technology. And if we're going to stem this climate change or stem global warming, we needed to get this stuff out there and in large quantities and fast. So I wanted to be a part of that movement. So I left the lab, much to my parents' displeasure, and and did some traveling in there as well. Tried to I'd gone from physics major to NREL lab tech and I was 23, 24, 25. I actually started waiting tables for fun, and I went into South America to travel around and just be a young person. And I came back with that vision of like, okay, I want to be part of that solar workforce. How do I do that? And I took my first SCI class, and it was with Ed Eaton and Flagstaff, Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah,
nice.
I think this is now we're talking 1996, 97. I'm starting to get lost in my mid 90s years. Those were fun years, and it was incredible. Like it's like, here's the guy I've been looking for. He didn't have the suit and tie, but this guy had all the answers when it came to the specifics of how you deploy solar, how you install it, how you design it. Like he had all those answers. And so it was really exciting to meet Ed, and then by default, all the other SCI crew members, Johnny Weiss, Lori Stone, Carol Weiss. I started finding my people within the industry that really, we connected well, and we had a lot of similar goals and interests, and it was just a really fun time as well.
Yeah, and back then it was, you wore all the hats. You were the janitor, or in the case of Ed, you were the engineer, but you were also the tradesperson, the tech, and you not only know how to size wire, but you also knew how to strip wire and pull wire.
Oh,
I think today we really have disconnected that. There's still plenty of solo operators that do it all, but there's a lot of specialization now. And I think that's good. That's part of how things are evolving and how we're growing and serving more people and getting more solar installed. But back when you started, the class was, how to sell solar, how to size solar, how to safely install it as close as we could to safely back then, and service it as well. And probably my guess is were you the only woman in your class or in the technical class at SEI?
let's see. At that first one in Flagstaff, there was maybe one other woman there, but certainly, yeah, it was either one or two women per a class of say 20 to 30 people. So that was the other interesting part. So I ended up going after that first class. I started I was still waiting tables, but I started volunteering with a local designer installer just to get more experience and more installation, just hands on. And so it was funny. I was waiting tables to support my solar habit because this is late. This is mid 80s. I mean, I'm sorry, mid 90s. This is 97. I mean, the market really had not taken off yet. So there weren't a lot of jobs to be had. And so I remember during that time while I was working with a guy, Ben Mancini out of Chino Valley, he would hire me. First I was just volunteering my services and get more hands on. After a couple of jobs, he's like, "This girl's doing some real work. Let's pay her." But it was like the jobs were so few and far between. I couldn't just depend on that. So I was still waiting tables and I was working little solar jobs on the side. And then SEI decided to have a women's only workshop, and they called me up and they said, well, you're a woman from our last workshop and you've been kind of hanging around and emailing us. Do you want to come down to Tucson and be a part of that? And I was like, oh my gosh, absolutely. Sounds like the best thing ever. And so Carol Weiss was there. Ed Eaton actually taught the first one. Lori Stone was there. And they just started realizing, hey, like we need to make this a more comfortable space for women to enter. And let's try something. Let's try a women's only workshop and see if they start coming around. And we did. And that class got filled up with a bunch of women. And we realized, what's going on here? How come they didn't come to the co-ed class? And one thing that Carol and I realized after many years of attending workshops and conferences together is that we found each other and we would sit right up front and we would sit there and there'd be something that would fly by and we'd be like, did you get that? And I would look at her and be like, no, did you get that? She's like, no. I'm like, okay, you ask this time, and so we would like play off each other and be the annoying kids up front, asking questions, but making sure that our questions got answered. But we supported each other. And what we also realized is that there was a comfort level. Like if she had me and I had her, okay, like we've got each other's back. She's got the same question I do. So it's not a dumb question, So we just realized there was a power there. There was a comfort level there that we had identified. And when we started teaching these classes, because after the first one, Ed was like, you ladies got to teach this. I can't teach a women's course. This is ridiculous. So we said, okay. So a bunch of us got together and worked that next course. It was probably about 4 of us and worked out who's going to teach what and who's got strength where and worked together to present a women's only course taught by women. And we had a ball. I mean, the women in the class wouldn't stop talking, wouldn't stop, which is sometimes great, sometimes hard, but usually great because they had been so quiet before. I mean, if it wasn't Carol and I mean, we got obnoxious and comfortable in our space, but it can take a lot to pull somebody out of their just being willing to speak up. Yeah.
Especially if they've been programmed. Even women today, but even more so in the 90s, programmed to be quiet, sit in the back. This is a man's world. That's unfortunately still prevalent today. It was way more prevalent then. And it sounds like you all, or actually the folks at SEI were ahead of the curve.
I think they saw a problem and they wanted to figure out if they could address it. And that was their solution. And we did that for many, many years. And we actually did a women's only wind workshop, which was a complete blast in the middle of, it was Kansas. And that was some fun. That was a really fun crew. Like we just started experimenting around women's only carpentry, women's only building. And then of course the solar classes continued. And so that was a really, really fun time in my career. Very inspirational. We would have women that had been electricians in their field, but had never been confident enough or comfortable enough to ask questions about the basics of electricity and how electricity actually works. And I actually had one woman like stop me in the hall after class, just sobbing. I mean, this tough woman who had been, she's out there, she's pulling wires, she's got her work truck, she's got her tools, she's not afraid of working with this stuff, but the ability to feel comfortable asking those questions and truly understand the technologies she's working with, that had been missing. She did not feel comfortable enough to ask that in a co-ed space. And so we just started feeling like, wow, this work is really important. We're helping other women get past their fears and resistance to asking those questions and giving them a comfortable space to really get confident in this industry.
Wow. I've never heard that. We've had a lot of beers together and we've talked about just about everything. I've never heard some of these tales from the early days.
Oh,
And
I've
I
got a
tell you,
lot of them.
I'm getting goosebumps a little bit about this, and maybe some sadness too, or maybe frustration and anger, because the way you described it, like going to those conferences and these classes, if you weren't next to Carol and if she wasn't next to you, you might not be here today doing this. It sounds like.
Maybe not, but I'll tell you something else. Okay. And this is where my parents get a little bit of credit. I've always been an oddball. I don't know if my dad filled me full of false confidence or what, but I've never been that afraid to speak up. I've always just kind of been my own, like square peg, round hole. I've always marched to a different drum. I really stopped caring what people thought about me a long time ago, for the most part. And so I would ask questions. I mean, I might feel a little weird about it, or I'd have to be like, give myself a little extra push. But I have to say, my dad always, he had two girls. And at the time, he actually has a third now, but he just made us feel like we had, we were important, we were smart, we had a lot to offer, and don't let anything get in your way, honey. And so that was a big part, I think, of me pushing through some of those barriers that still exist.
Yeah, well, you wanted to be an astronaut. I mean,
Right.
there you go. But yeah, so let's. You've got a daughter now, and of course, your eyes are open. You're watching what's going on in the world, and it's a different world. It's. I hope that my read is that we're making progress. We ain't there yet. What's it like looking at today's world through your daughter's eyes?
It's interesting. I mean, I think every kid that's going through those 12, 13, 14-year-old ages, like that stuff doesn't go away. Those are hard years. Their peers, if you don't dress a certain way, or you're just like, know how to work the social angles, and you're trying to figure all that out for yourself, like it's a hard time no matter what era you're born in.
Right. Or boys and girls. It wasn't easy for me either, yeah.
Absolutely. It's that's just a universal truth, not just for girls, but it can be particularly hard, I think, for girls. How they speak to each other, or kind of the things that happen, at school, and, just it's tricky. And so I've watched my daughter, who is pretty shy. She was pretty shy during those 12, 13, 14-year-old years. And one thing I'm just so thankful for is that she has found her space with running. I mean, she just, we actually, this is going to be interesting. I don't know if I'll get any calls about this, but I was really against my kids having phones. And however, in this day and age, she's starting to babysit and be out and about. And I'm like, well, it would be really handy if she had a phone, but I just don't want to see her on the screen all the time. So I made a deal. She asked for a phone. I said, you know what? If you maintain a sport, you can have a phone. And basically, because I didn't want her sitting home. And I said, okay, and at the time she was hesitant to actually try something like sports. But I knew that she actually, from earlier years in her soccer years, that she actually could run pretty well. And I was trying to find that carrot, that might just like give her that a little extra, like, okay, yeah, I'll give that a try. It was like that. She's like, yeah, sure. I'll do cross country. I'll do track. I get a phone. I'm like, yep, you just maintain your sport. You can have a phone. And so, I guess that's a bribe, whatever, call it what you will. But I will say, as soon as she started running and started getting exercise, realizing that she actually could run pretty fast, and started getting some confidence around her body and her abilities, and just moving and just getting that excess energy out, especially during those years, we saw a huge change. I mean, she used to walk around with kind of her shoulders kind of hunched over, just nobody look at me, nobody look at me. And then all of a sudden she started coming out, shoulders back, head up. And now she's actually at 16. She is qualifying for state and track. We're about to go to track next week. I mean, to the state competition for track. And she already went her first season for cross country last fall. And she's becoming an amazing runner. And something that I was kind of envisioning yesterday is like, these women, like this generational thing with women, how, my mom got us so far on her lap around the track. Okay. You think about a relay team and the passing the baton. And my mom, she was in the 60s and 70s, and she was doing her thing and got me to a certain point of like, okay, you girls can go, obviously have jobs and get married if you want to, don't if you don't, have kids if you want, just kind of let us know it's all good. Whatever you decide to do is good. And I feel like I've been running my laps around the track in my career and trying to figure out ways of promoting women, promoting in this industry, in this world, just in general. And I'm kind of like, in my mind, I'd like to be able to hand her on my lap, like not a baton, but like a sledgehammer. And so that when she's coming around the bend and she can just hook that thing at that glass ceiling and shatter it, so that nobody, the ones that come behind her didn't even know it existed, if you know what I mean.
What an image. Wow. Yeah.
I've been watching a lot of Marvel movies with the kids, so you can see where that comes from.
Yeah, no, I love it. Shattering that glass ceiling. I'm trying to figure out some kind of joke to make about PV glass and non-reflective, some kind of wonky techie joke. Oh wow. Well, that's exciting. Yeah. So, looking back, a lot of progress has been made. Amanda Bybee was on the pod a while ago, and I mistakenly said to her, well, yes, and of course, women are doing great in solar. And I think that I've got a pretty bad perspective because we've got more women than men outside my office door here. Yeah, and I know a lot of really strong, excellent, super awesome female solar folks. But she, how Amanda's well prepared. She had looked up the stats, and she says, "Well, actually, Jeff, it might feel that way because women are doing better than a lot of other, less represented folks, but we ain't there yet. And compared to 51% of the population, we're pretty far from being fully represented." And especially out on the tech side. I mean, we'll go to a solar conference and there's plenty of women in sales roles, in marketing roles, in finance and administrative roles. But my perspective is not nearly as many in the engineering side, and certainly not nearly as many in the hands-on trade side. And I don't think we're ever going to get to a 51% of our, folks, carrying modules up ladders are going to be female. But there's plenty of them out there that have figured out, like that woman you pointed out in your past. That's what they want to do. That's what they're wired for. That's what they're great at. But gosh, what an uphill battle to find a role there like that.
I think it's interesting. I think about this in a couple different ways. I taught a lot of co-ed. I've taught a gazillion co-ed classes. I've taught a lot of women's only classes, and women make excellent electricians. As far as attention to detail, there's it's a great job. I have to say, I loved my time on the roof, wiring panels, setting equipment, building battery boxes, all that stuff is wonderful. I mean, and then you move throughout the industry, depending on where you're headed or where the jobs are, where you want to move, or what your new spark of like, okay, I get the installation side. Now I want to work more on the design side or project management, or, maybe developing curriculum, or huge, now I'm really into these energy storage commercial scale projects. That is the cool thing about this industry. There are a lot of different directions you can go, and there's always new stuff to learn. But back to my original point, the thing we would notice in classes is, especially in a co-ed class where we could get a number of women to attend for whatever reason of that particular class, and we'd watch our groups and how they would work together. And the thing that we noticed was a lot of times starting the install. Okay, so we would have 3 days of in-class learning, and then we would go and do the install portion of the job. We noticed that the groups with the women would take a lot more time prepping to start the physical labor than the guys. Okay, and so the guys would just get in there and start hammering away, start mounting stuff, start wiring stuff. They would just let's get the job done. Sorry, that's really loud on the mic. And the women would sit there and talk amongst each other and generate usually just kind of a process. Like, okay, well, how should we approach this? And well, is that really the best way to do it? And like, there would be a lot more thought on the front end. And the interesting thing is that both groups would generally finish around the same time. So the women would go into it and they would usually make less mistakes, but they were hesitant to start. The guys would no hesitancy in starting, but would make lots of mistakes. And so they'd have to rework stuff. But at the end of the day, they both end up finishing the job about the same time. So it was just kind of a fascinating study in how the genders approach work and their like confidence with starting, or, it took the women some planning to get confident to go ahead and start. And so I don't know if that really speaks to why there's more women, in one venue of the industry versus another. That doesn't really address that. I just found it as an interesting side note to these especially the physical jobs that are involved with the solar installation.
Yeah. Well, even amongst a group of women or a group of guys, there's going to be different styles and approaches as well. But I think you're right that probably related more to how we're raised and how we're socialized and taught than to our, genetics or chromosomes. Women and men are pretty different.
It seemed like the women were more afraid of making a mistake. They were more concerned about, we better get this right, or we're going to look bad, or something. There was something there. Whereas the guys were like, make mistakes all the time. No big thing. We'll get through it. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, you've got a lot of perspective. Do you have any rough order of magnitude? How many classes that you've taught or co-taught?
It's hundreds. I mean, if you get into the online, no, I'd say hundreds. We're in the hundreds.
Okay.
I don't think I could get into the thousands at this point. I haven't taken a count. As far as the number of individuals, I'm definitely in the thousands. Whether that's tens of thousands or what. But
that's where I was going to go next. You've touched a lot of lives. Do you ever get like feedback from someone that you interacted with, I don't know, years and years ago, and then you bump into him or her and find out?
It's been great. Like? I mean, anytime I go to a solar show, I'll bump into somebody and said, "Oh my God, I took your class," or "Do you remember me from way back when?" And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It's been a lot of faces over the years, and 30 years. Okay, so like, people change, and somebody who might have been in my class in 1998 doesn't look like they do in 2020. But as soon as they kind of to remind me where it was and where they ended up, and I kind of connect the dots, usually I can place the face. It's harder with online, I have to say, because I do a lot of online instruction and there isn't any face-to-face. So that's trickier when it comes to, connecting with students on a personal level, on that time in the field. That's where you really make those connections. Unless there's a lot of back and forth on the message board, which does happen on occasion. Like, oh yeah, I was the one that really bugged you about that particular topic. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember you. But those are generally the students that go pretty far, the tenacious, they're persistent.
Engaged. Yeah. Yep. Neat. So, you mentioned that a magic thing happened, or it was a different vibe when it was a co-ed class versus a women's only class. And, there's all sorts of literature and people digging into the subject matter on women only schools and what a different experience it is. And there's pros and cons to all this stuff. To your knowledge, has anyone dug into a class that's only for African Americans or Latinos, Latinx folks? Do you think that the same dynamic of a safe space or a place that's less full of pressure?
That's a really good question, and I can't answer that. But who could? I bet be Carol Weiss. She does a lot of trainings all over the world, in Africa and all different parts of the world, and I think she might have a good beat on that.
I'll have to pull in another Solar Sister card.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I guess I would just say one thing with the co-ed classes. It was oftentimes what would happen is that we would get going on the install, and somebody. It's interesting on the male side, they wouldn't realize that they shouldn't have done this, but they were just trying to be nice. But they were like, "Hey, I'm used to this tool. I'll just do this part for you," And so it would oftentimes be, they'd be taking the tools out of a woman's hands and just to they thought they were being gentlemanly, being nice, being supportive. They know how to do it. They could see she was timid and uncomfortable. And so we'd have to step in and be like, no, 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 you can't do that. Appreciate the concern. We appreciate you. Obviously you're not coming from a bad space, but the only way to learn the stuff is to do it. And so that's the only way to get comfortable around it. And so everyone's going to have to do it themselves. And, there was a lot of learning from each other, though, because there would be those times like, well, maybe this guy's a carpenter and he actually has some really good tips on how to position your body to hold that tool, or how to like get those angles just right. So you don't drill in at a sideways angle and, whatever. So we tried not to like dash everybody, like trying to help out, obviously, but the key was having the women do it themselves. And so that was the only way to get past that phase.
Yeah, well, you point out that well-intended effort of wanting to help, but yet maybe doing more harm than help, or not letting someone learn because you're helping. I think that there's a lot of guys, a lot of business owners, a lot of coworkers, colleagues that are stumbling around and that are trying to figure out, what do I do? How can I help my friend, my sister, my colleague do better, learn this stuff. Yeah, it's I mean, I don't want to say that the white male folks are the victims here, but it's hard for everybody to navigate change. It's not just the gender dynamics. I think that after the George Floyd murder this summer woke up a lot of people, or brought a lot of focus to the issue of institutionalized racism, that a lot of white folks started really tiptoeing around, starting to really worry about how to talk, how to approach these issues. Sounds like you've been working on this, at least on the gender side, for years.
Yeah, as far as how to be, I guess you want to say how to be an ally or how to help out in this effort.
How to be a good human.
One thing is just
how to be a good human. Yeah.
One thing is just asking somebody, how can I support you? That person may have great ideas about what they'd like to see or how they would like to be supported, and simply asking them might be the best path forward. Or if you have an idea, be like, well, I was thinking this might be helpful. What do you think? And the other thing is like not talking over them and not cutting them off, and like giving them that space to be like, oh, this is really, all right, they're really asking me a question and I might not have an immediate answer yet. So I need a minute to think about this because I haven't thought about it before. It might take me a minute to frame my words. And just having that kind of a little, giving her the floor for one, and being patient about how that process rolls, and asking those questions. That's off the top of my head. I probably should be able to think of a lot more of those, but
I think those are good ones. I mean, and the third one, not talking over somebody, guilty. I mean, I do it all the time, and partly it's just the way I was raised and how society has kind of trained me, and partly it's my own personality of somewhat ADD, impatience, impulsivity. But yeah, I mean, I think the yet she persisted meme, that came out of this is like, oh my gosh, this woman's actually, saying her piece and standing up for herself, and the status quo wasn't ready to accept that. And so the notorious Ruth Bader Ginsburg, yet again helping us all learn, but it's got to be everywhere. You're probably still, even at your senior position, 26 years in the industry, you're probably bumping into some 4-year newbie trying to talk over you like he knows what he's doing, just because he's kind of been habitated to that, or that's been accepted all his life.
Yeah, I've just recently gotten more comfortable with trying to own the space or own the room. And that's, I think, been helpful because I haven't run into that very much lately. Certainly all the time back in the day. I mean, we used to go to teach the classes, like as Carol and I in our earlier days, and we would arrive to the site and we would be wait there ready to accept the students coming in the door, and they would be like, they would think that we were the receiving receptionist people, and the real instructors were yet to arrive. And it was funny because they would come and be like, "Oh, well, nice to meet you, ladies. It's so great that you're here. I hope to see you sometime during the week." And they would look at each other like, they have no idea we're the instructors. And so there was this assumption that, like, these younger women couldn't possibly know what they're talking about and be up front, giving us these lectures. And, thankfully it didn't take too long into the presentation where they started to see, oh, these gals know their stuff. And they would just kind of like drop any preconceived notions of what they thought we were or what we could do. And then that was kind of a kick for them. Like, wow, that's fun, these girls really, and they're engaged, and, because the SCI thing is all about being comfortable. It's a big family. We're all a bunch of eclectic folks and industry people across the board, with Mayfield Renewables, with Home Power, with SCI, we're all kind of a bunch of quirky, wonderful individuals. And we're pretty comfortable in who we are at this point. And so I would just say that owning of the space, coming in and just not being shy, speaking up, letting people know that, what your background is, what your knowledge is. And it hasn't been as much of an issue lately, I have to say.
Yeah, well, it's probably because you're owning your space, and you talk about it as though it's an internal thing, but it projects out as well, and other folks sense it. I think we see that. We can recognize that in others. I bet we could probably name some folks that are inspiring as like examples of, oh yeah, he walks with a certain confidence because X, or she's got this.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
important.
it's tricky in the early days, I have to say. Sometimes you got to fake it till you make it. That is like, oh God, I'm feeling like nervous inside right now. This is going to be tricky. And then you just kind of be like, nope, not going to, like, that's not what I want to project. And then there's a certain point when you actually do own it and you're like, oh yeah, I got this. Like, it's not an act anymore. Like, I'm really, really confident in where I'm at and what I know. And I've dug in deep enough that I know that there's really, like, there's no, at a certain point, it's only opinions. You dig and dig and dig, thinking you're going to find new facts. At a certain level, you realize these are at their base root, they're opinions. And I've started to make my own. I've dug deep enough that I'm like, I can make an opinion about this, this code, or the what's the basis for it, like, because I've dug deep enough for long enough, I know how it's established, that I don't need to be always looking to others for my answers. Sometimes you can figure it out and realize that you've got enough there, and the other resources to go to fill in the gaps.
That happens all the time, at inspections. When you've got somebody from the AHJ, an inspector, and you've got, usually we, the practitioners, are more, more of an expert on the solar side of the National Electrical Code than this kind of inspector that has to know. He probably knows a lot more about the general code than I do.
Right.
But then it comes, it's like an old, Sunday school, Bible quoting match of, verse and chapter.
Exactly.
But I've seen you do it. I've seen you teaching a class and, knowing your way around not just 690, but also 110. And, as the code's evolving, it's funny. Finally, the people that we know are the ones writing the code cycles.
Exactly.
We've arrived. Not that the code's perfect. That's why it keeps changing all the time.
Right.
Interesting stuff. Well, we've touched on a lot of stuff. What anything jumped into your? I'm going to hand over the controls of the spaceship to you, Justine. Anything that we haven't talked about yet on this topic that you think might be useful or interesting to our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I was thinking about in getting ready for this interview is just advice that people might need. And I think my biggest one is not giving up. It's like that persistence coupled with confidence. Like, that's everything. Be persistent, be confident. Even if the confidence might not be warranted quite yet, but just know that you're going to find the answers. If you try hard enough, if you push hard enough and you don't give up, you're going to get to your goal. You're going to get there. You're going to get that job you want, or that project through, or that position on the board you've been looking for. You're like, just don't give up. And it may take longer. It may be a longer route to get there than you originally thought. I have a funny story, actually, about that. When I was studying physics at CU and I first got into this, discovered the PV effect, I started looking at companies that I might want to work for. And SCI was the first one that popped up. And so back in 1993, I graduated in May. It was by, I think, the next week or within 2 weeks, I took a road trip out to Carbondale and I found SCI. And I'm like, I'm here. I have my physics degree and I want to work in solar. I want to work with you guys. And they were just like, no, like you don't have any field experience and we're not hiring. They didn't hire much back then at all. But they're like, you could take a class. And I was like, oh, dang it. I thought it was going to be so easy. I just drive out there with my diploma and hand it over and they'd be like, okay, here's your here's your badge. And so it was comical in my, just not understanding that how things work and how they take their time. And so I went back and I worked for NREL, and then, all these years later, so this is like almost 30 years ago, I'm still working with SCI. So like I found my way there, and I came back around. It took longer time. I had to get more infield training. I had to do more things in my life to get there. But if you really want it, it'll happen. And maybe it won't ever go away.
Yeah. Yeah. Be careful what you ask for. But no, that's good. That's inspiring advice. Oh man, Justine. Well, this is great. I love these podcast interviews because even with folks that I, have known for decades, I learn new stuff about them and get to appreciate them even more. And I appreciate you and what you're doing for the industry professionally and technically. And then also in a new light, what you're doing for the industry in terms of blazing a path forwards for women who want to be involved on the technical side. Um, I'm sure there's hundreds of them. I mean, hell, the largest solar company in the United States has a CEO who's a woman. So that's pretty amazing, and that's pretty great. Yet, even with that, there's still most people would say, "Well, I don't know if I can do that." I think that the winds are pointed the wrong direction for a lot of people, unless they can be confident and persistent, and probably get somebody to be right next to them to kind of egg them on and be part of their tribe, their posse, their team. That seems to have been a pretty important piece as well.
Absolutely. That was something actually I was thinking about, is like what I look for in a potential employer. And essentially it's like a visionary with heart and an open mind, and I feel like those are the people that have helped me kind of like allow me to move into the space, allow me to go for it when I got, inspired and passionate about something. Those folks like Dave Renee, Johnny Weiss, Ed Eaton, Joe Schwartz, and the Home Power crew, and now Ryan Mayfield. Like, you look for those folks that are like open-minded, they've got a heart and they're visionary in their spirit. They're in this industry for a good reason. I bet your chances are good of success and getting to where you want to go, and growing along the way, and not being afraid of taking chances. And this is a great industry. This is, I would say, of course, I'd love to see more women in this industry. I'm surprised we don't have more women in this industry because it is such a perfect fit for us. There's so many opportunities and wonderful people in this space. It should be a no-brainer for us to have a more of a equal numbers situation going on. But for some reason, we still don't. But I certainly would encourage any woman who's thinking about entering this industry to go for it. It's a great space.
Well, we need them. We need everybody. And, it's been a long, long slog, but this is our time. And this industry is going to blow up. If the numbers are right, we're going to need everybody to be doing every role in the industry. It's all hands on deck moment for us. And I'm glad that you and the other pioneers have been pushing forwards to learn and experiment and take risks, so that now it all comes together, and we can not only build a a clean energy infrastructure to give our planet a fighting chance, but we can also do it in a way that also makes society better, makes society more inclusive, more just, um, and hopefully stronger. With that classic kind of diversity of different approaches. Um, we could talk all day, all night, and then the next day about this stuff. And I think we'll keep talking about it. In the meanwhile, we got to wind this pod down. We've got our fun section coming up, the Better Together section. So we've got the part one is the note and promote piece. Where you can share a book or some kind of an author or thought leader that you want to amplify and why, and then share a piece of advice or wisdom that you want to pass on to our listeners.
Well, okay. As far as the book goes, I went with the solar route. I didn't go with the gender diversity inclusion. I actually there was a new book sitting on my.
Whatever
okay.
works.
And I have to say, to be honest, I haven't read the whole book yet because I just got it in the mail. But Greg Smith, a longtime industry, guru, I would have to say at this point, just released his book, The Battery Powered Home. And what I've read so far is great. It sounds just like Greg. He's an old Navy guy, right? I believe he's SMA before that, and now he's with Tygo. Anyway, he's going to be in the industry for a long, just like the rest of us. I think he'll be circulating around till we all decide to, go do something else in our retirement years, which will probably be more solar. But anyway, the book so far, it's hysterical. It sounds just like Greg. It's super engaging, and it's definitely not dry. It's full of great explanations. And so what I've gotten into so far, I'm really impressed with. And so I'd like to promote his book, Greg Smith. And my advice, I feel like I've already given. Just don't give up. That persistence, along with confidence, is everything. So keep at it. Keep pushing that ball forward. Get your shoulder into it. If it's a big boulder, give it all you got, and don't give up. And if it's just not going anywhere, just try a different tactic. Sit back, reflect. Give yourself a breath, some breathing room, and then get back at it, either from another angle or just with a little more force if needed.
Good advice. I appreciate that. And the next part is the Better Together 1+1 playlist. We are building this playlist for our listeners, by our listeners, for our community. It's on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your streams. So give us 2 songs. One maybe that's a old standby, a fave, and then one that's something new that you wanna put a spotlight on.
Okay, well, definitely an old standby fave, which I just heard recently when I was out in California. I was like, oh, God, I love this song. And so I downloaded it. I've been playing it. I play it sometimes multiple times or one after another. It's Stevie Wonder, I Believe. So that's a great old song. Once you hear it, you'll be like, oh, yeah. It's so sweet. It's so wonderful. I Believe, Stevie Wonder. And then this other one is just going to show my age because it's not really a new song, but I heard it the other day, and it's funny for 2 reasons. One, it's just a great song. So it's Florence and the Machine, Dog Days Are Over, except I've always thought it said Dark Days Are Over. And so I was like, yeah, solar with storage. Like, we're going to have these outages and our dark days are going to be over because we're going to have lights during these outages. And that song came on. I was like, dark days are over. And then I looked it up. I was like, it's dog days, darn it. But it's still a great song.
Oh, I love it. And we've got the storage angle on it. That's so great. Justine, the battery guru.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is super. Thanks so much for being a guest and for a great episode. Thank you to our sponsor, Third Sun Solar. And thanks mostly to our listeners. You all are the most important ingredient if this podcast is going to have the impact we want it to have. So spread the word, put it on LinkedIn, put it on your socials, share it with your colleagues, your friends, and subscribe and join the movement. You can find all the show notes, references to Greg's new book and some of the other stuff that we've talked about on solarforall.show, SHOW. And, we're better together, and we need everyone in an inclusive movement if we're going to address the huge challenge that climate change is. And along the way, we just might address the bigger challenges in our economy, in our culture, in our society. And I think your daughter is a lucky person to be growing up in this world at this time. And for her and for everybody else, let's make solar an inclusive place for everybody to put their talents and efforts and lean their shoulders against that boulder. Thank you, Justine.